Recognizing the leader of the third party.
Oh, thank you, Honourable Speaker, and glad to take my place to speak in favour of the amendment that's been put forward that Bill 22 not be read a second time now, but that the subject matter be referred to the Special Committee to review the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act. We've heard a lot of very passionate speeches this afternoon, and also very informed about the many, many reasons why this piece of legislation absolutely should be referred to the committee that is sitting right now, to this committee that was tasked with the work of reviewing this exact legislation, just as the committee in 2016 that was tasked with the work of reviewing this legislation. And the member for Abbotsford West just suggested that perhaps the members of the committee feel insulted that the work that they were tasked to do is looks like it's not going to be relevant anymore. But I wonder about the members of the 2016 committee who spent a year working on recommendations to this House on specifically amendments and reforms to this legislation. And of all the recommendations that were in that report, a year of hearing from experts, public hearings, many, many sessions of deliberation, none of those recommendations appear in these amendments. In fact, several of these amendments are the opposite of what those recommendations were. But I do want to start with answering the member for Abbotsford West question. I'm delighted to do so, about the last time that no member of a government caucus spoke to an amendment to their bill that was on the floor. March 26, 2019. And it was the Bill 10, the Income Tax Amendment Act. And in fact, the third-party caucus, we put forward 3 amendments, 3 motions. And each of us spoke each time to those motions, and the member for Peace River North spoke. Not as a member of government caucus, he was a member of the official opposition, but not a single member of the government caucus spoke to those amendments. And in fact, only one member of government spoke to that bill, and that was the finance minister when she introduced it and when she wrapped up debate. Not one member of government caucus spoke to a bill in March of 2019 that created the framework for a $6 billion tax-funded subsidy of the LNG industry in British Columbia. And isn't it interesting today that we are discussing this and remembering that, because today this government put out an update to their climate plan, a climate plan that still includes this massive taxpayer funding of the LNG industry in British Columbia, a climate plan that still allows for a huge increase in fracking in the northeast of BC. And at the time, no member of government caucus spoke to that bill. No member of government caucus, except for the finance minister, spoke in favor of that bill. And 3 amendments were put on the floor, and it was only a member of the official opposition who spoke to those amendments. So thank you to the member for Abbotsford West for setting up a little history lesson. Always delighted to talk about the things that happen in this chamber. And I think it's really important, the point that was raised by that member about debate. And I think again, I come back to, when are we at our best in here? And we're at our best when we're debating. We're at our best when we're listening. We're at our best when we're responding to the points and the arguments and the persuasive calls that are being brought forth from both sides of the House about legislation that will shape the future. Because that's what we're doing in here. We are shaping the future. On March 26, 2019, the future that we shaped includes the largest point source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. Today, what we are debating is a future in which public information and public data and public access to government information that belongs to the public. Today we are debating how public that will be, and whether in the future the citizens of this province will have the same privilege that they've had up until now to access that information without a fee, to access the information about the Premier's office. And we've heard over and over again in the cases that have been made, all of the reasons why I think we don't want that future. And I think that we should be working in here together in our debates to shape the best possible future for this province. So right now a story is being formed, and it's a story of a government that brings forward a bill that the government members are reluctant to speak to. I know some caucus members have spoken to it. But it's a story of a government that brings forward a bill, and there is a lot of resistance to this bill. Not just from the official opposition, not just from the third party, but from the Privacy Commissioner himself, from the public, from academics, from researchers, from the press. A lot of people are alarmed. And so this story is, at the moment, this government will use its majority to push this piece of legislation through because they can. But it could be a different story. It could be a story of a government brings forward legislation. It's 1 year into its majority. And the two opposition parties with whom a year and a half ago they were working with quite closely in response to a public health emergency, unprecedented, and that there was enormous amount of collective pride in this building, in this chamber, of the response and the collaboration and the collective sense of responsibility that we had to shape a future at a time when our sense of what that future might look like was evaporating in front of our eyes. A year and a half ago. So the story could be that 1 year into its majority, the government brings forward a piece of legislation and hears and recognizes that the resistance to this legislation isn't simply political. It's not just partisan. It's legitimate and very serious concerns about the process, about the implications of ignoring the work of a standing committee right now, a special committee that was struck. And instead of using the power of that majority something that, when this party was in opposition, decried many times. They say, let's choose a different ending for this story. Let's choose an ending in the story where we are responsive, where we hear and listen to and respond to the criticisms that have been brought forward, because that's what a responsive government does. Let's have it be a story where we choose transparency. And we say to the public, you know what? We thought that these amendments were necessary and important, but we hear you, and we are going to turn this over to the committee to get your input on the record, and then have the committee come back to us. Because there isn't an urgent rush to pass this legislation. This legislation isn't going to determine whether people eat, or have a place to sleep, or get medical care. This legislation is internal to the workings of government. And nothing will prevent government from doing good work if this legislation doesn't go through. And so we can actually be a government that tells the story of good process. A government that says, we care about decision-making processes, we care about them being transparent, we care about them being accountable. And for that, we are going to show how much we care by supporting this amendment. Because there's nothing that prevents this government and its entire caucus from standing up and supporting this amendment. Not a single thing. And the amazing thing would be, they would be applauded and celebrated for doing so. It would be a win. It wouldn't be, oh, the opposition parties, push the government to do something they didn't want to do. No, no, no. The story is the NDP government responds and listens to the concerns of the public and the Privacy Commissioner and researchers and academics and the press. And they make a choice, a surprising choice, not a choice many governments make when they have majorities, because it's a sign of weakness. But it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It's actually a sign of recognizing just how significant the burden of governing is. When you admit we're on the wrong track and we can still correct our course, and that's what we're going to do, that is a sign of strength. That is admirable. That is something to respect. And so here we are. Yet again, debating a bill that a government doesn't want to talk about very much, certainly not in here, doesn't want to engage in the debate, as the member for Abbotsford West showed, but does have the choice. Every single member of the chamber has exactly the same privilege as every single other one. And every individual member has the right to stand up and vote the way they want to. One person wanted to talk to me before they considered running for office. And I said, you need to write yourself a letter. You need to write yourself a letter for the day when you're in the legislature and you have to vote against what you want to vote for. You need to write yourself that letter right now and tell yourself, what do you do? What choice do you make on that day? And I think on March 26, 2019, think a lot of people voted for something that perhaps they didn't want to vote for. But every member of this chamber has the opportunity to stand up and vote for what they believe in and what they stand for. And we asked this of the government then. And the story from that time we see today is a story of a government trying to say, we can have an LNG industry, an increase in fracking, a massive increase in greenhouse gas emissions, and a climate plan. But you can't have both those things and say that you're leaders in climate. You can't. You need to choose. And so today, there's a choice. And the one thing that we take away from us at the end of our time here, and all of us are here in a transitory way, some of us less transitory than others, but all of us are going to leave and pass these seats on to the next representatives. But what we will take with us for the rest of our lives are the decisions that we made, and the ones that will haunt are the ones that we made that we didn't want to. And so today is one of those opportunities. And I hope that we can have a good story out of this. Because the story's not done, it's not written. We're writing it right now. And it might have a surprise ending, and I sure hope so. So with that, Honourable Speaker, I will absolutely be supporting this amendment, and I hope to be joined by many, many of my colleagues in this chamber. Thank you.